Welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, a series of short and shareable conversation starters for those of us who have or love and support people with a complicated and beautiful brain. Here's your host, Angela Geddes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Kitchen Table Conversations. I'm saying welcome back because I know and I'm assuming that many of you have heard and tuned in before. So I'm grateful for that. And if this is the first time, I'm really grateful for that as well, and hope that what you listen to and hear in this podcast is inspiring and comes back to your kitchen tables. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm a week behind. January is absolutely flying by. But honestly, I'm not all that disappointed because it is kind of my least favorite month. As much as I look forward to warmer days ahead, I also recognize the importance of appreciating the coziness of these winter days. And I really hope that the new year is starting off well for all of you. I'm also not one to kind of wish time away because I realize, especially the older I get, how quickly it does go, and we'll never be this young again. So let's enjoy it. Even the darker days, literally and figuratively. Today, I want to talk a little bit about some of the best kept secrets in health overall. Things that aren't discussed nearly enough, but can have significant impact on our well-being. For those of you who've been following me, you know that I'm very passionate about prenatal health and reducing the impact of exposures that can impact brain and body development. But today I want to broaden that conversation because we know, and we've always known, that alcohol and other more toxic substances are not the only factors influencing complex neurodevelopmental conditions, neurodivergence overall, and some of the mental health challenges that we're seeing. So when we talk about mental health challenges like anxiety and depression, and then we talk about some learning disabilities and other more complicated presentations like autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and certainly fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, we often focus on treatment and management. But as I've always been saying, there's a lot that can be done in terms of prevention and optimizing our health overall. Many of these conditions that I just mentioned are influenced by factors that we don't often consider, especially what we actually consume and put into our bodies. So we live in a time where we are encouraged to believe that there are no bad foods and to embrace all shapes and sizes. And body positivity is a really important thing that we're promoting, and I get it. And I do fully support body positivity and inclusivity. But I also think that we're missing an important part of some of these conversations. Not all foods are created equal, and many processed foods in particular contain additives and sugars that impact not only our physical health, but our brain function and our overall well-being. There's a direct link between gut health and mental health. And that needs to be talked about a little bit more. So the hidden impact of processed foods can be significant. We're surrounded by foods that are designed to be addictive, actually. Potato chips, chocolate bars, sugary drinks, and fast food. They are convenient, they taste really good, and they are often cheaper than whole, organic foods. But while they may be inexpensive in the short term, they come with long-term costs. Financially, and certainly what I'm talking mostly about is the cost to our health. So I'm a reader, might have a little bit of a book addiction, and I have a few that I haven't even touched yet, but I did start to read over the holidays, and I'm continuing to read a book called Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. And in her book, she discusses how ultra-processed foods impact our metabolic health and can lead to chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, and even some early cognitive decline. She states that every bite we take is a choice that we make between fueling our health or fueling disease. And this perspective is really something that I've been having to really consider lately, and it's crucial when we consider the rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and mental health struggles. And here I have to disclose that, I've always been aware of what I eat and try to live a fairly balanced life. And I'm certainly not perfect at it by any stretch, nor do I understand the complexities and the science behind some of the food and our metabolic function and how cells work and all of that stuff. I'm going to stay in my lane here as a pretty good social worker. I am by no means a dietitian. But I've always been fascinated. And to me, it's beyond keeping a healthy weight for vanity and for appearances, But I've sort of always believed that if we don't choose to eat healthily, we are going to feel a little bit sluggish. We're not going to have the same kind of energy. I've always seen food as fuel. And I've also seen, the impacts of obesity and weight gain in terms of people's ability to play sports or to remain active. And so there are some legitimate barriers when our weight becomes cumbersome. So that's been kind of the focus though, but that's not really what we're talking about here. I know lots of really slim, slender, active people who have high cholesterol, and they have maybe some higher blood pressure and some other tummy, I call it a tender tummy, and some problems with digestion and discomfort. And that's got everything to do with the food that they bring in. So even if they're eating lots of healthy things, if there's a lot of chocolate or refined sugars and processed foods, even in addition to some of the good stuff that we're putting in our bodies, we very well may be maintaining good weight, and that's going to help our knees and our backs and our joints and all of that stuff. But the chronic inflammation and the other side effects of the not so good foods that we put in our body really matter. So we now understand that processed food disrupts blood sugar balance, leading to energy crashes, mood swings, and even impairments in memory and concentration. Metabolic dysfunction has been linked to anxiety, depression, and neurodevelopmental disorders, emphasizing the needs to prioritize as much as we possibly can whole foods, nutrient-dense foods, and foods that work the best with our bodies. So in terms of prenatal health, it's more than just avoiding alcohol. And we've always known that. There's a lot more that goes on, and there's a lot that we can be doing in terms of protective factors that make that help to make the pregnancy as healthy as it can be. And that remains and will always be my focus. And as I learn, I'll continue to share. So again, most of it's been focusing on alcohol. It's a significant issue. I'm never going to stop talking about it. Well, actually, I hope I do someday. I hope that it's no longer an issue, and maybe we'll get there. But I also believe we need to have a broader conversation about how diet, pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, and then afterwards, and what we choose to feed our little ones, how it impacts the baby's current and future health. So, what a mom eats during pregnancy does influence the baby's metabolism and the digestion and even the long-term health outcomes. Dr. Means highlights how fetal metabolic programming affects not just the child's weight, but their risks for conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease down the road. The choices we make during pregnancy can shape the child's lifelong relationship with food and health. And to this point, I just learned the other day about another individual with FASD who's only 12 to 14 years old, who already has high blood pressure. And I work with many who have prediabetes, full-on diabetes, lots of kids who over and under eat, so they're eating foods that are contributing to their dysregulation, and that are also gaining excess weight, which impacts their view of themselves and their abilities to participate in some of the things that their friends are doing. So the impact is broad and it's wide, and that's why I'm suggesting that we bring this conversation back to our kitchen tables. So again, what can we do to break the cycle? What can we do to prevent? What can we do to be helpful? Many of us grew up with processed foods. Now, I'm one that grew up with my mom was able to stay at home and did a lot of homemade cooking. I tried to do that with my children too. However, there were things that were Lunchables, there was hot dogs and, Chef Boyardee and things like that were accessible, they were convenient. We felt like there was some nutritional value in some of it. And we also believe that our liver is a magnificent organ and that it can, just process out all the stuff that we don't need, which it does, but that doesn't mean that our cells aren't getting confused and impacted by some of the extra stuff that goes into our bodies that it's not familiar with. So I do remember attending a workshop where I learned about how our bodies respond to additives and preservatives and how they trigger inflammation and even conditions like leaky gut syndrome. If we want to improve mental and physical health outcomes, we need to rethink about what we put into our cupboards. And if unhealthy foods aren't as easily accessible, we maybe, that reduces temptation. And when we are on the topic of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, we have to remember that sometimes it's really, really hard for kids who have impulse control issues and who tend to ruminate about things that they want. Stopping eating a part of a bag of chips is extra specially hard for some. So we have to recognize our vulnerabilities when it comes to some of these food choices, and then also as parents and caregivers do our best to mitigate the risk of excessive consumption or overnutrition is what Dr. Casey Means refers to it as, overeating, and how that really does impact us all over. So not very long ago, I saw a little baby, and I'm loving how the eating habits of even really young babies has changed. So there's a lot more independent food, playing with the food and eating the food and getting accustomed to different textures and tastes and that kind of thing. But I recently saw a little toddler eating a takeout French fry, and it really made me pause. And I kind of wondered, I think most of us know that French fries might come from potatoes, but by the time they become French fries, there's not a whole lot of nutritional value. And there's also a lot of salt. There's a lot of excessive trans fats in most cases. And I'm not really sure why a perfect little body would need to even taste something like that and get accustomed to, let's face it, French fries are lovely. Most of us really appreciate them. But why would we want to put anything that doesn't absolutely fuel our babies in the very, very best way? Why would we do that? Especially when there's not very much nutritional value. And one would say, well, there's lots of nutritional value in the other foods that kids eat, but obviously there's less room for that when we do fill it up with things like French fries. And it's not just about weight gain, but that's significant, right? We don't want to fill our kids up with empty calories, but it's more about the long-term metabolic health and how we're setting up the next generation for success or more opportunities to struggle. So at these kitchen table conversations, my role is to continue to plant seeds, ideas that make us think about how we can prevent common health conditions and to improve our overall well-being. While some people may argue that we're living longer than in past generations, even with the foods that we are consuming, but I'd have to challenge that by asking, are we living healthier? And the diseases that we face today may be different, but some of them may be preventable. So I'm not a scientist, and again, I do try to stay in my lane as a social worker, but I've read enough to know that when we feed our bodies better, they function better. And we can do better when we know better. So as you sit around your kitchen tables, I encourage you to bring this one back home as well. Talk about food, talk about health, and how we can make choices that benefit both ourselves and the people that we love the most. And once again, thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you taking this time to share with me. Until next time, with many thanks, Angela.